Hi, it's Tansel here. Now, I'm not only just a four-time Australian memory champion, but I also run events, and those events are TEDx events. And over the years, I've been a professional speaker, in fact, for over 20 years. And when I've run my TEDx talks events, I've essentially selected my speakers based on a lot of auditions and also looking at the applications. So I've got a fair idea of what makes effective presentations and, something that connects and clicks with people. So what I thought I'd do is I would look at TEDx talks around the world. So just select ones and see from a memory point of view, how that's connecting with people. So breaking down the talk and, the reason why I want to do this is just so you can understand what makes effective talks and what connects with audiences. Now, obviously, you probably know what connects as well, what drives you to certain things. But I guess from a memory perspective, if I break things down even further, you might get maybe even a further appreciation, or you might understand, why that person did it this way or why they said this. So I thought I'd quickly get into the reaction space, break things down and see how we go. So let's do it. So the first talk I'm going to look at is obviously How Failure Drives Learning. And that's by Manu Kapur. And the reason why I chose that is I love the word failure. A lot of people hate it. I love it. So I do a lot of failure-based memory training with people. So I don't want to give too much away, but let's just break down his talk, look at his talk and see what he's got to say. So let's get into it.
I want to ask you to think about emotion words that you associate with failure. Sad, guilt, shame. Now I want to ask you to think about emotion words that you associate with success. Joy, happy, elated. Now imagine we could pile those words on the left, on my left.
I'll just pause it there. What I'll be doing is I'll be pausing in between just so I can add a few of my comments in. But as you've noticed, he's asking the audience a question. So what that does, it gets people to engage and interact with what he's saying. And that's good because any engagement, mental interaction, people thinking to themselves, you asking questions to yourself is getting to connect to his talk. And, it's getting to connect to an emotional word such as failure. So it's good. He's drawing comparisons between, what you see for the word failure and also what you feel as well for success. So interesting where he's going with this. Let's continue.
Failure words on my right, the success words. Which pile do you think would be bigger? It's the failure words. That's what studies show. The failure associated words are the larger group. About 1.5 times more failure associated emotions than positive success related emotions. In fact, if I ask you now, just jot down the 10 emotion words that come to your mind very quickly. The first 10 words. Chances are that you will jot down more negative emotion words than positive emotion words.
This is really true. Believe it or not, when I first met my wife, she was running a workshop for youth, and I was running a memory workshop as well. And her workshop involved getting people up on stage and getting them to recount their strengths. And everyone struggled to come up with even 3 strengths, right? But if we ask ourselves, our weaknesses, or ask people their weaknesses, they'll be able to rattle off a whole bunch of stuff. So the negative stuff is really, you can come up with a lot more. So interesting that he's mentioning that as well.
Why is that? Are you some kind of deeply negative people? I hope not. But the real question is, why is it that in our language, we have developed a greater vocabulary, a greater nuance and greater differentiation for describing failure than success? Evolutionarily, it makes sense. Back in the day, it paid off to describe failure and danger very precisely, very vividly, because your life depended on it. If you describe success, not so much. Because failure has such a cost attached to it, more than success. Perhaps our language has developed in a way where we can signal, we can label, we can describe, and we can communicate failure and danger to everybody. It's a core feature, not the only feature, but a core feature of a language that helps us learn from that failure. But it's not just in our language. Failure is how our bodies learn too. When my younger son was 18 months old, we sent him to school, a kita, a nursery. We thought we would give him an education. What we got in return was immunity education. For the whole year, the three of us took turns falling sick, one germ after the other, the whole year. But if you think about what is immunity education in the first place, a new bug comes in town, your immunity system can't detect it or can't fight the infection, it fails to prevent the infection, you fall sick. And provided that sickness, that failure, doesn't kill you, it is precisely the signal, the opportunity the body needs to adapt, to fight, to recognize, so the next time it comes around, it's ready for it.
So I like what he's doing here. He's putting his own personal story, right? And personal stories are very powerful because it's like watching a movie, right? But you're watching it in your head now. You're imagining it. So a lot of the really good TED Talks out there, they have powerful stories that connect. And what he's doing now, he's going back and he's saying, look, we've sent my son to school and we're talking about immunity and the body and what we're essentially learning from it or learnt from it. So stories like that, it doesn't have to be super long, but something that connects to the core topic of failure, which what Manu's doing is very, very powerful. So let's keep going.
And that's how it comes out stronger. And that's basically the principle of vaccination in a very simple way. In fact, the word for vaccine comes from a Latin word called vacca. Do you know what it means? Cow. What do cows have to do with vaccines? Well, it turns out the first successful vaccination was using the milder cowpox virus to inoculate against the deadlier smallpox virus, hence the word vaccines. That's the principle of vaccination. But I really see it as a principle, a process by which you deliberately take the body to failure in a safe way, and modern vaccines do that in a very good way. And then you give the body the chance to adapt and learn from it and come out stronger.
Interesting what he's saying here. The vaccines, they deliberately take the body to failure in a controlled way. This is what I do with my memory training with people as well, is deliberately take people to failure so that you can really learn what's working and, more importantly, what's not working, right? So any form of training that you're doing, don't just think of success. What you can do is look at, okay, at what point am I failing, or where's my limits? And then you can sort of push through those limits as well if you're sort of into that sort of stuff. David Goggins is a classic example. He just goes nuts, crazy over, pushing through limits. You don't have to go to those extremes, but interesting how it brings it up as an example for vaccines with failure. So I love where this is going. So let's continue.
Not just any kind of failure. It's a particular kind, what I call productive failure. Strength training is something similar. As a teenager, I used to play competitive football. And I had a coach who was very strong about strength training. And his philosophy was that you really have to take your body to failure and then push a little bit more. We used to hate it. But he was right. Because what happens in the moment when you're doing your push-ups and pull-ups and you almost can't do it anymore, and you push it, your muscle fibers actually rupture. Your strength temporarily actually decreases. But if at that point in time, you give the body the rest, the nutrition, and you allow it to recover, in about a day or two, you go back and engage that muscle, it comes out a lot stronger than where you initially started. So you go through this process of a dip, and you come out a lot stronger from where you started. In strength training, it's called super compensation. To me, it's basically a process of taking your muscles to failure in a safe way that you don't injure them, and then giving them a chance to adapt and learn and come out stronger. It's not any kind of failure. Again, it's like productive failure. Now, failure is not just how our bodies learn, it's also how our minds work. So I ask you, if you think about failure and the mind, what comes to your mind?
Let's pause there. I want you to write, if you've come this far, good on you. I want you to write down in the comments the question that he's talking about now. Right, let's just go back.
Now, failure is not just how our bodies learn, it's also how our minds work.
Yeah, so not just how our bodies, but how our minds work as well in terms of failure. So a lot of the stuff that I do with my clients is based on this. So it's really interesting that it brings this up now.
So I ask you, if you think about failure and the mind, what comes to your mind?
So write in the comments below.
To my mind, I think of trauma in the extreme case. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. About 6 years ago, I lost my father to cancer. And my partner at the time, she ran away with another man. On the same day.
Wow. So he's just laid a bombshell story. I mean, we've got little stories along the way, but a bombshell story is a story that makes you go, wow, is that what happened? And did this happen as well? Something like that really hits the brain and also the heart as well, because it's emotional. That's what makes the talk even more memorable, right? If you're just constantly trying to remember your talk, and if you're just looking at bits and pieces of data and you're presenting data, well, that's not going to be memorable. Whereas something like this, something that's personal that you can share, that's always going to connect more with audiences because it's unique to you. It's your experience and, you know, what he's been through, my goodness. You can imagine. And if, you know, maybe you've gone through something similar, so you connect at a deeper level. So doing a presentation, a talk, is not just about delivering information, but finding those little examples that are going to have some sort of an impact on the audience. So yeah, I'm just going to take that back a bit and let's just listen to that again.
The post-traumatic stress disorder. About 6 years ago, I lost my father to cancer. And my partner at the time, she ran away with another man. On the same day. It was traumatic, to say the least. Diabolical even. But hey, when you think about this failure to success spectrum, all the disorders you find are always on the failure spectrum. You have PTSD and so many others. We don't have anything on the happy end. There's no such thing as a post-success happiness disorder. It doesn't exist.
By the way, if you've got post-success disorder, comment down below. I want to know who's out there who's got this illness of post-happiness.
Because failure, it has such a strong impact on our minds, has such a long-lasting impact on our mind. And that's why it is part of our psyche. A couple of months after my dad died, I was giving a talk on productive failure and learning, and there were two psychotherapists in the audience. They came up to me after my talk and said, Manu, what you're describing about productive failure is eerily similar to what we do with our psychotherapy patients, PTSD patients, for example. So we design a very safe space, a supportive space for them to, confront their failures, not dismiss them, not suppress them, but actually confront their trauma, confront their failures, reimagine them, redescribe them, and with our help and support and counseling, reframe them so that that gives them the chance to adapt and learn, find catharsis, find healing, and come out whole again. And I said, wow, maybe I should practice what I preach. So I went into therapy, and it works. Well, it's still a work in progress, but it does work. You see, sometimes you have to lose yourself, quite intentionally, quite safely, I hope, so that you can find yourself again. And that's the power of productive failure. It's not just any kind of failure. It's really productive failure. Now, from trauma, let's think about something that is more fun. Play. Children love to play. We all love to play. Play is actually such a fundamental developmental mechanism where fun, frolic, and failure are very good friends. So now I want you to imagine I have a box. It's a toy, okay? It's a toy. It has several buttons on it. And if I press one button, it makes the toy go. Makes a sound, maybe change color. It makes the toy go, right? Now imagine you're all children who love to play with toys. I'm going to divide you right down the middle into two groups, group 1 and group 2. Okay. So I'm going to come to group 1 and say, hey kids, here's a new toy. I'm going to show you how to play with it. See, if you press this button, it goes. And you press this button, oh, it goes again. And again. Now you can play with it. Play as you like. I've told you exactly how the toy works. I come to group 2. I say, hey kids, here's a toy. I don't really know how it works. There's lots of buttons here. Let me press them. Do them randomly. Sometimes it goes, sometimes it doesn't. You're confused. It's uncertain. It's all ambiguous. You do not understand what's making it go. And I observe you both play. Which groups do you think would be more eager to play with the toy? Group 2. Who would spend more time with the toy? 2. And here's the important part. Who would invent more strategies to figure out how the toy actually works? Also group 2.
Yeah, interesting little experiment, isn't it? If you look at both groups, group 1 and 2, group 1 already had the answer. So it's like, press this button, that's the game, right? Get bored of that straight away. Whereas group 2, because there's so many different elements on what's wrong, what's right, what doesn't work, all that sort of stuff, there's more experimentation and more feedback loops. And once you get that feedback loop, then it's like, ooh, don't do this. Now I'm going to try this again. So the scenario is that you're more engaged in it as well. And you've got, because you're getting more feedback, you've got more time with the toy. So it's interesting, this example that he gives, because a lot of the time we all want answers. We all want that one button answer that does everything. But really what we're looking for is this toy that's giving us a whole bunch of feedback. And, we get frustrated because we don't know how to play with the toy. But in reality, we're getting all this feedback, and that's helping us to learn a lot better. We just have to be mindful, I guess, that this is happening. And you can apply this to your everyday life as well, whether you're meeting people, whether you're delivering a talk, and so on. So that's why getting feedback on talk is very, very powerful thing to do as well. So let's continue.
Why is that? It's the same toy. You're all children who love to play with toys. Why is the difference? The only difference is the way I used ambiguity, uncertainty, and failure to induce exploration, to induce engagement, so that you can take that opportunity, work on your curiosity and failure to try to figure something out. That's how child's play works. But it's really all about productive failure. And it's not just failure in trauma and play. Your core memories, I can hack using failure. Let's do a mind-reading game. I'm thinking of a 4-letter word that you need to guess. Okay, and remember, 6 months from now. I'll give you a hint. The 4-letter word starts with the letter F. I don't know why that makes people laugh. Right? So now there are 2 scenarios. First, there's no chance you can mind read me, or anybody for that matter. So I know you're not going to be able to guess that, so why bother? I'm just going to tell you the word. Here's the word. Remember it. I'm going to ask you in 6 months' time. The second scenario is, well, I know you can't read my mind, but I still want you to make a guess, a wild guess. So make that guess now.
Okay, take a guess what it might be. I'm going to say it's the word fake, or you can have flog. What's your comment? Comment down below. I'd be interested to see what you guessed for his word. Let's get some interactivity for this video. Let's go.
And then I'm going to tell you the word. Now, I was thinking of fury. Did anybody guess fury? Oh my goodness. Okay, 1. So there are 300 or 599 others who did not. Right? So very good, massive amounts of failure in guessing what the word was on my mind. And now imagine if in 6 months' time I were to ask you, in which scenario would you remember the word better? Was it in the first one or in the second one? It's in the second one. That's what studies say. And it's not just that we can hack our memories with failure so that we can remember better. My entire work as a learning scientist is around problem solving and learning, higher order cognitions. So I work with abstract and difficult mathematics concepts. And even there, instead of telling them directly, we design problem solving activities that are designed intentionally to lead you to failure.
Yeah, this is exactly what I spoke about earlier, is that instead of just giving an answer and not knowing the context behind how to get to the answer, that group 2 outcome is so much better because it uses, like you said, exploration and certain things that create context around the problem, and that context creates learning. So it's great that I didn't even know this was memory related. So it's fantastic to hear all this stuff as well. And hope you're all learning something as well, which is great. So let's continue.
We bootstrap that failure for deep learning. That is productive failure. So it's not just in our language. It's not just how our bodies heal and adapt and learn. It's not just in our mind and psyche that we adapt and learn using failure. I tell you, it's also in our practices, in our social practices, cultural practices, disciplinary practices. Take engineering design, for example. I'm a mechanical engineer by bachelor's training. And as an engineer, you build stuff, robots, systems, cars, computers, planes, and so on. And you want to build them so that they work. And they work well. You don't want them to fail. So how do we do that? So we do a lot of testing, a lot of modeling, a lot of calculations, just to make sure that whatever it is that we're building actually works. So let me ask you this. Do you think all that modeling and testing and calculations, are these calculations about success or failure? They're all about failure. Henry Petrosky, who studied engineering design very deeply, argued even more strongly. He said, every single calculation an engineer makes is actually a failure calculation. Because successful engineering is all about trying to understand how a thing breaks or fails. And so all this engineering beauty that we enjoy, I hope you realize that the underlying ethos, the underlying process, the underlying philosophy is all undergirded by failure. The same thing happens in business, in startups. Startups who can use this failure-driven, iterative philosophy, develop products that are better and sell. And those who don't, and many don't, fail. And when they fail, Petrosky would argue that these failures themselves present us with opportunity to learn from what not to do. And nowhere else in any practice is failure so pertinent than in the single biggest invention of humankind. Do you know what that is? Science. Many people think science is all about finding the truth, about success, making things work, of proving things. What if I told you science is not about that? It's actually about failure. You see, when you first come up with a finding or a new effect or a new experimental or new theory, scientists around the world don't go and say, oh yeah, great, now let's shift here. Let's believe.
I'm just going to stop it there for a moment. It's interesting where he's leading the failure. I guess all throughout his talk, he's making people, I guess, realize that it's more than what they think it is, and that it's connected to so many things that we generally don't think of. So he's busting the myths, essentially. So, yeah, and as people think more about, is it used in engineering calculations, or it's in science, all that sort of stuff, they start to realize that, hang on, this is part of our lives. I shouldn't really be scared of this word failure. I should be looking at it in a different light. So, yeah, interesting where he's taking this talk, because he's really making people bust those myths and look at failure in a way that's going to help them and not shy away from it. Because I know people that shy away from the word failure. They say, oh, there's no such thing as failure. It's all about, being productive and all that sort of stuff. Well, it is, but the word is there. You can't hide from it. So let's use it to its full extent and understand that, yes, we can grow through failure. It's not about hiding away from it. So love where he's going with it. Yeah, we've still got another 4 minutes. Wow, awesome. Let's keep going.
Now, one study doesn't prove anything. What one study does is it gets people to say, okay, I'm going to try to replicate what you did. And the logic of replication is not to prove me right. The logic of replication is to prove me wrong. Falsification. So they try to replicate. If they fail to falsify my finding, they say, okay, we've got 2 people now saying this. If another lab does the same thing, failure to falsify, now there are 3 labs failing to falsify, and so on. So what we think of as truth or models that work, or when we say we're proving something, it is really a long tower of failure. When repeated attempts to fail or falsify a finding themselves fail, that's what we call a model that works. That's what we call truth. It's at the heart of science, an enterprise that's given us so much at humankind. So if you're still not convinced, be it in our language, in our bodies, in our minds, in our disciplinary practices, and I've got one last thing to throw at you. I put it to you that we owe our existence, our very existence as a species, to failure. Charles Darwin, Theory of Evolution. It's often whittled down to something like, the survival of the fittest. So imagine there's a population of butterflies. Some are big and bright colored, others are dull and small. We're inclined to think that maybe the big and bright ones are fitter, but actually that's not the case necessarily. It depends on the environment. The fitness of an organism is a function of them and the environment. If the environment has predatory animals or birds, guess who's going to be eaten first? The big and the brighter ones are going to be seen first, and they're going to be eaten first. So who's going to propagate? Are the ones that are dull and weak. Failure and fitness are also very good friends. What we see in speciation are the species that survive, like us. What we do not see, that this is on the back of massive amounts of failures that did not make it. Think about that. Even inside us, in our DNA replication, failure is at work. The process is not perfect. The process is not 100% successful. It makes errors. Some of these errors or mutations are lethal, detrimental. Some of them have no consequence at all. And others can give you really strong fitness advantages. If they were not there, we would not have those advantages. These are the evolutionary leaps that can really propagate a species. So again, failure is at the core of not just science, but also our own existence. So what do these seemingly unrelated phenomena, language, vaccination, strength training, memory, play, trauma, design, entrepreneurship, science, evolution, what do they have in common? I want you to take away 3 things. First, the failure is at the heart of them. It's a core mechanism in all of them. It's not the only mechanism, but it is one of the core mechanisms. People don't realize that. Second, that the impact of failure, the effect of failure is a lot stronger and a lot more long-lasting than that of success. Second. Third, and this is the most important part, that if the effect is so powerful, we now have a science that can intentionally, deliberately, and safely design for failure so that we can adapt and learn in transformative ways. And that is not just any kind of failure. That is productive failure. Thank you.
Very good. So, failing productively, that was really interesting talk by Manu Kapur. I took away quite a lot from it actually, and hopefully you did as well. I love the topic of failure, and like I said, I use it in my own coaching and training and working with people as well. So the presentation itself, what I try and analyze is, I don't analyze if his intonation's perfect or if he's walking around or if he's engaging. What I look at from a memory perspective is what makes it memorable. How is he connecting those story elements together? Is he using stories? How's he engaging with the audience? Is he asking questions? So a lot of that we covered during the breakdown. So let me know if you like this sort of stuff. I'll do more videos as well, and comment down below what you took away from the talk as well, because I think that's quite valuable in terms of understanding what your take on failure is as well. Maybe there's something deeply traumatic that he mentioned in there, or maybe there's something small that you can essentially get over by doing it more and more. For example, these YouTube videos, I struggled to initially get into it, but then I realized that I was after perfection, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to keep going. I don't care about failure. And then more and more I did it, the more I looked at the failures and think, okay, here's how I can improve, and so on. So that's just my little example. And obviously there's heaps more in terms of, understanding how it works. So hopefully that's my first breakdown ever in terms of reacting to a TEDx video. Let me know if you'd like to see more, and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.